I'm Daryl Jones, Director of Research at Hedgeye. I'm here with JT Taylor, our Managing Director from our Washington, D.C. office. We're here for another edition of Washington to Wall Street. Have 5 or 6 key questions we're going to get into with JT today. And the first one obviously relates to today specifically. I think you call it the Acela primaries, 5 northeastern states, both on the Republican and Democratic side. How is this going to play out today, and will we get any information that really matters one way or the other?
Yeah, first on the Republican side, Trump is poised to win all 5 states. Polling has him ahead in every single state, so he'll walk away with the lion's share of the delegates today. What will matter is, of course, the size of his delegate take, 1, 2. What he does with that going into Indiana, which is next Tuesday. Indiana is going to be a pivotal state for him and the rest of the race. At this point today, by all indications, Kasich will likely place second in a lot of the primaries.
Yep.
Cruz will probably place third, and both of them will be mathematically eliminated. So it will be a matter of just stopping Trump from here on in.
And then on the Democratic side, is this the final blow for Bernie, or does he keep fighting to the convention like he's indicated he'll do?
Again, it depends on how big she wins today. Hillary Clinton wins today.
Yep.
Right now she's poised to win 3 out of 5 states. She could sweep all 5. I believe Connecticut and Rhode Island are the closest 2 of the 5. If she has a commanding victory today, the calls for Bernie to step out will be louder and louder and louder. So whether he does it or not is TBD, but I suspect that he will step back, reevaluate with his campaign,
yep,
and decide whether or not to make this bloody. I mean, he could continue the fight to the nomination, to the convention in Philadelphia this July, and that will only further bloody Hillary Clinton,
yep,
and maybe even damage their chances in November. So at some point, I think you'll see party leaders stepping in and calling on him to step out. Whether or not he'll listen is another question.
Yep. And then the one minor thing which you touched on this morning, or not minor maybe, but you touched on in your morning note, but Cruz and Kasich have come to an agreement on 3 states basically: New Mexico, Indiana, and or was it Oregon?
Oregon.
Do you think that really means anything, or is it sort of much ado about nothing?
I think it's much ado about nothing, and I think it could actually backfire and end up helping Donald Trump, but in the sense that he's pitting it as the establishment guys are teaming up on me now,
right,
and it's just going to be another rallying cry to his troops to say, look, they're throwing everything at me and the kitchen sink. I need your help, and I need you guys to get out there and vote these next 2 or 3 pivotal primaries.
Yeah. So then the next, or not the next one, but the really key primary for the Republicans is California, because that's where I think it's 170. I think it was 172 delegates or, yep, something like that. But really, that's the one that's going to decide whether I think Trump has it locked up ahead of the convention or not. One thing we talked about earlier was Trump is now actually 50% or above in the tracking polls on the Republican side. What do you think going into, get out your crystal ball, what do you think going into California?
Yeah, again, I think there's one step before California, and I do think that's Indiana,
okay,
which is next week. So he has to win in Indiana, or it's going to, California and New Jersey also votes on June 7th as, yep, well. So crystal ball, I mean, if his numbers stand up and if he doesn't make any missteps,
yep,
we've seen missteps along the way, and going into Wisconsin, he kind of learned from that, stepped back, and sort of cleaned it up a bit. Then he kind of falls back into this pattern,
right,
where he says something outlandish or outrageous that causes the American people to sort of give him a second look. So he's got to sort of walk that fine line. He may not think he has to, but he does, because there is a lot on the line going into California. So he's got to win, again, 54% of the states leading into California. Again, you're right, California.
Yeah, I think 54% of the delegates.
Of the delegates going in. You're right, California will be decisive. But it's going to be a lot of groundwork going into California, and a lot of groundwork looking at sort of, if he wants to win on the first ballot, because Cruz and Kasich are going to make him is to make it challenging for him to win on the second ballot. He's going to also have to fight a separate fight to bring in to lock in the delegates on the second round. So he's going to be fighting a 2 or 3 pronged war going into California. So it's how he pools his resources, spends his resources and his time. And again, there's a lot of his supporters saying, let Donald Trump be Donald Trump. He already has that share of the electorate. Those people are going to be with him through thick and thin. I think you and I discussed before his missteps on the way and how we all thought that, okay, he's done, he's toast. After comment after comment after misstep after misstep, now
he seems to be able to continually fight back. Despite,
he fights back, but he's not looking for that segment anymore. He has to win over.
He needs to expand his audience.
He needs to expand his audience. So that's what he has to do in California.
So if we just fast forward and assuming this tracking poll, the recent tracking polls are right, he does have 50% of the Republican side. That would get him the delegates he needs if you do the math. So then we have probably Clinton versus Trump, very high likelihood of that. He's consistently pulled the worst versus Hillary. I looked today at the poll aggregate. She's up by about 9 points. As we know, these things can change quickly. But how does the primary play out, and what does he need to do to sort of narrow that gap? And then secondarily, what are the kind of key themes to be watching?
Yeah, so to narrow that gap, he needs to win over 3 constituencies, and those are women, minorities, and millennials. And right now, his numbers in those 3 groups are higher than any other negative out there. And
so his negatives within those groups are higher. Yep.
And so that's the first thing he has to do. I mean, there is a case to be made where he can put a couple of blue states in play. I don't buy that for a second. Some of the blue Rust Belt states in play, I don't buy that for a second. Again, because it's going to come down to.
So he would do that potentially by having Kasich as an example.
Kasich is a good example. Yeah. And again, you can already see him shifting to the center on some of his comments. So he's again looking to bring, garner the support of women and millennials right now. He's got a lot of work to do with minorities. As well.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that's good. I think that's a pretty good update for today. Obviously focusing on the primaries and how that plays out. Although I think both think it's sort of in the books for today, and then the next big one really is Indiana next week, and depending on how that goes, California is going to be critical on the Republican side. So great. All right. Thanks everybody. It's Daryl Jones and JT Taylor for another edition of Washington to Wall Street.